Something shifts on February 23rd, 2026, and you feel it before you can explain it. It does not arrive with noise or chaos in the outer world. It arrives quietly, almost privately, in the emotional undercurrent of your being. The moon forms a symbolic square to Pluto, an astrological alignment often associated with psychological depth and emotional excavation. And whether you consciously follow astrology or simply feel subtle, energetic tides, something within you tightens. Memories rise without clear reason. Old sensations return. Conversations you thought were resolved begin echoing again in your mind. This is not coincidence, and it is not punishment. It is awareness surfacing. If you have been sensing this emotional pressure building, if something inside you feels stirred or unsettled, share in the comments what has been moving through you. Your experience is part of this collective reflection. This moment is not about prediction or fate carved in stone. It is about perception. Moon square Pluto symbolizes intensity, buried truth, and emotional depth seeking acknowledgement. It represents the shadow stepping forward, not to harm you, but to be seen. And the fact that you are here, listening, contemplating, feeling, suggests that you are ready. This is not a literal portal in the sky. It is a psychological threshold within you. The shadow is not an enemy. It is a voice that has waited patiently for recognition. And tonight, that voice grows louder. The moon represents instinct, emotion, memory, the subtle language of your inner world. Pluto represents transformation, power, the hidden forces beneath conscious awareness. When these two archetypes form a square, tension emerges, not as chaos, but as pressure designed to reveal. You may notice that your reactions feel amplified. Small triggers carry disproportionate weight. A passing comment lingers longer than it should. A familiar fear resurfaces with surprising intensity. This is the emotional undercurrent rising to the surface. You are not regressing, you are remembering. Beneath your present circumstances live emotional imprints from earlier chapters of your life. Patterns formed in moments when you had to adapt quickly in order to feel safe. Perhaps you learned to stay quiet. Perhaps you learned to anticipate abandonment. Perhaps you learned to control outcomes so you would never be caught off guard. These strategies were intelligent once. They protected you when you needed protection. But growth asks a new question. Are these strategies still serving your destiny? The intensity you feel now is not a sign of weakness. It is information. And information, when approached with curiosity instead of judgment, becomes insight. Insight becomes power. You are beginning to recognize the architecture of your fears, the scaffolding beneath your reactions. And once you see the structure clearly, you are no longer unconsciously trapped inside it. Transformation rarely begins with fireworks. It begins with a quiet, internal acknowledgement. A moment when you pause and think, I see what is happening here. That pause is the first portal. Recognition does not feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable. You may notice jealousy that you wish you did not feel, anger that surprises you, a surge of insecurity that seems irrational. Rather than pushing it away, you observe it. The shadow is not evil, nor is it a flaw in your character. It is unprocessed emotion seeking integration. It is the younger version of you who learned certain behaviors to survive circumstances that felt overwhelming at the time. When you observe your emotional reaction without immediately defending it, something subtle but powerful occurs. You separate your identity from your feeling. You are not your fear. You are the awareness witnessing it. This distinction changes everything. Fear thrives in unconsciousness, in automatic reaction. But when you bring conscious light, simply noticing without condemnation, the intensity begins to soften. Recognition is not collapse, it is reclamation. It is the moment you take responsibility for your internal world without blaming yourself for having one. And in that responsibility, strength begins to form. Pluto's symbolism often circles back to power and control, particularly the hidden ways we attempt to secure safety through dominance or emotional withdrawal. Under this alignment, you may notice where you try to manage outcomes too tightly, where vulnerability feels threatening, where you anticipate betrayal before it has occurred. These behaviors are not evidence of failure. They are evidence of intelligence shaped by past experience. At some point, controlling variables felt safer than trusting uncertainty. Yet survival and living are not the same thing. Emotional intensity in relationships may surface now, subtle power struggles, magnetic attraction intertwined with fear, situations that feel fated but unsettling. These dynamics are reflections, not punishments. When someone triggers you deeply, they illuminate a wound, asking for awareness. The universe does not orchestrate suffering for sport. It mirrors what is unresolved so it can be understood. When you recognize your need for control, the illusion that controlling every detail ensures security, you begin loosening your grip. True safety does not come from managing others. It comes from emotional stability within yourself. And this alignment presses gently but firmly against the walls you have built, not to shame you, but to show you that you are strong enough now to live without them. Every intense reaction carries a memory beneath it, even if you cannot immediately identify the scene. A surge of fear may not be about the present moment at all. It may be an echo, rejection, abandonment, powerlessness, shame. These emotional imprints settle quietly in the subconscious, shaping behavior in ways that feel automatic. Moon square Pluto symbolically opens a doorway to these deeper layers, not so you relive pain, but so you recognize its influence. When you pause during an emotional wave and gently ask, "What does this remind me of?" something often shifts. You begin to trace your reaction back to its root. This is shadow integration, not eliminating fear entirely, because fear is part of being human, but understanding it deeply enough that it no longer drives your decisions unconsciously. There is courage in emotional honesty, more courage than pretending you are unaffected. As this alignment intensifies, emotions may come in waves, unexpected, raw, powerful. Let them move through you without attaching a story of failure to them. They are not here to drown you. They are here to cleanse patterns that have quietly shaped your destiny for too long. Integration often looks unremarkable from the outside. It is not a dramatic announcement. It is a subtle shift in response. The moment you choose not to react the way you always have. The moment you pause before defending yourself. The moment you say, "I feel triggered," instead of projecting blame outward. That pause is alchemy. The square between the moon and Pluto symbolizes friction, and friction generates heat. Heat transforms matter. Your emotional intensity is not something to suppress. It is raw material for growth. When you own your feelings, rather than projecting them, power struggles begin dissolving into self-awareness. You stop seeking validation from those incapable of giving it. You stop trying to win arguments that were never about the present moment. You respond from who you are now, not from who you had to be in the past. This is emotional maturity unfolding in real time. It quietly alters the trajectory of your life, because destiny is shaped by how you respond when you feel threatened. And with each conscious pause, You choose awareness over autopilot. There are invisible pathways in your life that branch at every emotionally charged decision. One path is familiar. It follows the pattern you have known for years. The defensive response, the protective withdrawal, the urge to control or retreat. The other path feels less certain, but more expansive. It is the path where awareness leads instead of fear. Moon square Pluto symbolizes this crossroad. You may feel tested, confronted by situations that expose vulnerabilities you thought were resolved. But exposure is not humiliation. It is illumination. If you react unconsciously, the old pattern quietly continues, reinforcing a narrative you have already outgrown. If you respond consciously, even imperfectly, something subtle shifts. A different internal timeline begins forming. Not because the sky decreed it, but because you chose differently. Breaking a pattern is rarely loud. It is often invisible to everyone except you. Yet it changes the architecture of your future relationships, your self-trust, your emotional stability. Integration does not mean you no longer have shadows. It means your shadows no longer steer your decisions without your consent. In this awareness, fear loses its authority. And in that release, a quieter but stronger version of you steps forward, steady, honest, and no longer governed by what once controlled you. There is a moment in every deep transformation where it feels like you are moving backward, as if the emotional intensity means you are failing instead of evolving. But what feels like regression is often descent, and descent is sacred. Under the symbolic pressure of Moon square Pluto, you are invited into the inner chamber of your psyche, the place where fears were first formed and quietly stored. This is not a dramatic collapse into darkness. It is a courageous willingness to sit with what you once avoided. You may notice themes repeating in your thoughts. Questions about worth, trust, security, control. They echo because they want resolution. When you allow yourself to feel without immediately fixing, analyzing, or escaping, you step into a deeper layer of self-awareness. This is not about blaming your past or dissecting every memory. It is about sensing where your emotional body still braces for impact. The descent is uncomfortable because it removes distraction. It asks you to witness yourself without armor. Yet within that vulnerability is clarity. The shadow is not infinite. It has edges. And when you reach those edges, you begin to understand that what once felt overwhelming is simply energy waiting to be integrated. Fear often disguises itself as urgency. It whispers that something must be solved immediately, that someone must be confronted, that you must secure reassurance right now. But beneath that urgency is usually an old imprint reacting to perceived threat. Moon square Pluto symbolically heightens the sensation of emotional danger, even when no actual danger exists. Your nervous system may respond as if history is repeating itself. The key is not to dismiss your feelings, but to gently question the story attached to them. Is this moment truly unsafe, or is it familiar? Familiarity can feel intense because it touches the past. When you slow down and breathe through the surge instead of acting from it, you reclaim power. Emotional threat is often an illusion created by unresolved memory. When you see that clearly, the urgency softens. You begin distinguishing between intuition and fear. Intuition is steady, even when firm. Fear is frantic, even when quiet. The more you observe this difference, the more stable your internal foundation becomes. And stability is the soil where destiny grows. Deep beneath conscious thought lives a narrative about who you are and what you expect from life. Perhaps it tells you that love requires sacrifice, that vulnerability leads to loss, that power belongs to others, not you. Moon square Pluto shines light on these hidden scripts. It does not erase them automatically, but it reveals their presence. And revelation is the beginning of rewriting. You may notice yourself questioning long-held assumptions. Why do I expect abandonment? Why do I assume conflict means rejection? Why do I feel responsible for managing everyone else's emotions? These questions are not signs of instability. They are signs of awakening intelligence. When you become aware of the script, you are no longer bound to perform it unconsciously. You can choose a different response. You can experiment with trust where you once withdrew. You can communicate calmly where you once reacted defensively. Each small shift rewrites the narrative at a subtle level. Over time, these subtle shifts accumulate into a new identity, one shaped not by past wounds, but by present awareness. This is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming more authentically you. Transformation is often romanticized as explosive, but true rebirth is quieter than most expect. It does not require cutting everyone off or making dramatic declarations. It happens internally. You notice that something which once triggered you intensely now passes with less charge. You observe a familiar dynamic, but feel less compelled to engage in the old pattern. That subtle difference is rebirth in motion. Under this alignment, you are not meant to burn your life down. You are meant to recalibrate your emotional vibration. Rebirth is not the destruction of the past. It is the integration of it. The shadow becomes wisdom when acknowledged. The wound becomes strength when understood. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your internal landscape changes. What once felt threatening now feels manageable. What once felt overwhelming now feels informative. This is not numbness. It is emotional sovereignty. You are not disconnecting from your feelings. You are relating to them differently. And that shift alters the energetic signature you bring into every interaction. As emotional intensity settles into awareness, a new portal opens. Self-trust. Not blind confidence, not ego, but grounded inner steadiness. You begin trusting your capacity to handle discomfort without collapsing into it. You trust that you can feel deeply without losing yourself. Moon square Pluto symbolically tests this trust by bringing hidden material to the surface. But every time you sit with a difficult emotion and survive it without spiraling into old patterns, your self-trust strengthens. This is how inner power is built, not through control, but through resilience. You stop fearing your own emotional depth. You stop labeling intensity as weakness. Instead, you recognize it as sensitivity paired with awareness. Self-trust grows quietly, like roots extending beneath the surface. And once those roots are established, external storms lose their power to uproot you. You become less reactive to manipulation, less dependent on validation, less controlled by fear of loss. Because you know that whatever arises within you, you can meet it consciously. There is a subtle but profound shift that occurs when shadow work integrates with intuition. Before integration, fear can masquerade as intuitive warning. After integration, intuition becomes clearer, less distorted by old wounds. Moon square Pluto symbolically purifies perception. As you release projection and emotional defensiveness, your intuitive sense sharpens. You begin discerning truth without paranoia. You sense red flags without catastrophizing. You feel attraction without losing discernment. This alignment between intuition and shadow is powerful because it restores internal coherence. You are no longer divided between instinct and awareness. Instead, they collaborate. You become more attuned to subtle, energetic cues, not in a mystical fantasy sense, but in a grounded psychological way. You read tone, body language, emotional shifts with clarity, and you respond from calm observation rather than triggered reaction. This alignment changes the quality of your decisions. It changes who you attract and what you tolerate. It refines your vibration at a foundational level. At the heart of this portal is a simple but life-altering realization. You no longer need to live in survival mode. Survival mode once served you. It sharpened your senses. It protected your heart. It helped you navigate uncertainty. But survival is reactive. Sovereignty is responsive. Moon square Pluto symbolizes the transition between these states. As you integrate fear rather than suppress it, you move from reacting automatically to choosing deliberately. You become less governed by the need to protect at all costs and more guided by the desire to grow consciously. Sovereignty does not mean you will never feel fear again. It means fear no longer dictates your direction. It becomes a signal, not a ruler. And when fear is no longer in control, your destiny opens in subtle, powerful ways. You choose partners aligned with growth rather than familiarity. You communicate boundaries without hostility. You pursue opportunities without self-sabotage. The shadow, once intimidating, now stands beside you as integrated strength. And in that integration, you feel something steady, emerging, an inner authority that does not need external validation to exist. There comes a subtle but undeniable moment when you realize the old version of you cannot continue in the same way. Not because you reject who you were, but because you see clearly how certain patterns shaped your experiences. Under the symbolic intensity of Moon square Pluto, outdated emotional timelines begin to lose stability. These are the timelines where fear dictated choices, where silence felt safer than honesty, where control felt safer than trust. As awareness expands, those timelines start collapsing, not dramatically, but structurally. You notice you cannot comfortably engage in dynamics that once felt normal. You feel internal resistance when you attempt to shrink yourself to maintain peace. This resistance is not rebellion for the sake of conflict. It is alignment, recalibrating. The internal architecture that once supported survival strategies is being redesigned. And redesign often feels like disorientation before it feels like clarity. You may question yourself. You may wonder if you are overreacting or becoming too sensitive. But sensitivity paired with awareness is evolution. The old emotional timeline dissolves, not because it was wrong, but because you have outgrown it. And when something is outgrown, it cannot hold you the same way again. True power is not found in eliminating darkness. It is found in integrating it. The shadow does not disappear. It becomes conscious. Moon square Pluto symbolizes this merging of opposites within you. The part that fears abandonment stands beside the part that trusts connection. The part that seeks control stands beside the part that understands surrender. Instead of fighting internally, you begin allowing these aspects to coexist. Integration feels balanced, not extreme. You no longer label yourself as too intense or too emotional. You recognize that depth is part of your design. When shadow integrates, shame dissolves. You stop apologizing for having complex feelings. You stop hiding your emotional intelligence. Instead, you refine it. Light without shadow can become naive. Shadow without light can become cynical. But together, they create wisdom, and wisdom is stable. This integration alters your energetic presence. Others sense your groundedness. Conversations shift. Dynamics subtly reorganize around your steadiness. Not because you demand change, but because your vibration no longer matches old imbalances. You become both softer and stronger at the same time. Activation is rarely loud. It is not always accompanied by visible breakthroughs or dramatic external shifts. Often, it is an internal decision made in silence, a commitment to no longer abandon yourself emotionally, a choice to feel without collapsing, a willingness to speak truth without aggression. This is the quiet activation unfolding now. Moon square Pluto does not grant superpowers or guarantee outcomes. It symbolically reflects a psychological threshold. And as you cross that threshold, something stabilizes within you. You trust your perception more. You question your fear more gently. You allow vulnerability without equating it with weakness. Activation is the moment your awareness becomes embodied, not just understood intellectually, but lived emotionally. You may still feel intensity. You may still experience triggers, but they no longer own you. You respond from center rather than chaos. This shift may not be visible to the world immediately, but it is profoundly visible to you. And that internal visibility is enough to begin reshaping your path. Destiny is often imagined as something predetermined, something written beyond your influence. But in truth, destiny unfolds through patterns of response repeated over time. Every moment you choose awareness over autopilot, you alter direction slightly. Moon square Pluto highlights these choice points with intensity. It shows you where unconscious reaction once dictated outcome, and it offers you the opportunity to respond differently. Destiny is not a single dramatic event. It is the accumulation of emotionally conscious decisions. When you choose not to project fear onto someone who has not harmed you, you alter your relational future. When you communicate boundaries without hostility, you alter your energetic field. When you allow yourself to feel deeply without drowning in it, you alter your self-concept. These subtle alterations compound. They redirect the trajectory of your life in ways that only become obvious in hindsight. Destiny is not guaranteed. It is cultivated. And you are cultivating it now, through awareness, through integration, through emotional courage. After intensity comes stabilization, not numbness, not indifference, but grounded presence. You begin noticing that situations which once destabilized you no longer carry the same charge. Your nervous system feels less reactive. Your thoughts feel less catastrophic. This is not because life has stopped challenging you. It is because you have built internal capacity. Moon square Pluto symbolizes excavation, but excavation creates space, and in that space, steadiness grows. The stabilized self does not seek conflict, nor does it avoid necessary confrontation. It responds with clarity. It listens without immediate defensiveness. It trusts its ability to handle discomfort. You become less concerned with controlling how others perceive you, and more concerned with staying aligned with your truth. This stabilization is the reward of integration. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be forced. It emerges naturally when shadow is acknowledged rather than suppressed. And once stabilized, your emotional world becomes a source of strength instead of confusion. As February 23rd, 2026 passes, the symbolic energy of Moon square Pluto lingers not as a dramatic event, but as a memory of who you chose to become during intensity. The shadow integration portal was never about eliminating fear completely. It was about understanding it deeply enough that it no longer steers your destiny without your consent. You have looked inward. You have questioned your patterns. You have allowed uncomfortable emotions to surface without immediately silencing them. That alone changes you. Moving forward, Fear may still arise, but now it arrives as information, not command. You meet it with curiosity instead of panic. You respond with awareness instead of reflex. And in doing so, you reclaim authorship over your life. If this message resonated with your experience, share your reflections below. Your journey may illuminate someone else's path. And if you feel called to continue exploring these cosmic reflections and psychological awakenings, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing so this community can grow stronger together. Remember, the shadow was never your enemy. It was a part of you waiting to be understood. And now that you understand it, you walk forward steadier, clearer, and no longer governed by the fears that once shaped your choices.